let's talk wide receivers that you should start or sit in week 15. We made it, baby. Mama, we made it. Week 15, the playoffs, we are here. The good news is there are no bye weeks. So all 32 teams in play, 16 matchups in total. And we're going to start off here with Rams at 49ers. Thursday night football. They gave us a spicy one for the first week of the fantasy playoffs. 48.5 point over under. Huge amount of points expected. Superstar wide receivers on both sides. We're definitely going to start Puka Nacua. We're definitely going to start Cooper Kupp. Both of those guys have been so incredible. It's very obvious at this point, though, that Puka Nacua seems to be the wide receiver one on this team. I mean, the man is playing some of the best football since week 8 onwards. So he is my wide receiver 3 overall. Technically, this is the second worst matchup in fantasy football. I don't care. I don't care at all. There's no way you're going to let me sit one of these guys, right? Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp. There's absolutely no way I'm going to sit any of these names. So they're definitely going to be out there with my playoff hopes on the line. You know, Cooper Kupp is getting those touchdowns, 4 touchdowns in the last 5 games. So while the targets aren't there, he's still being targeted in the red zone where that money is. So we love to see that. High over under, of course, ride or die, baby. On the opposite side, Juwan Jennings is a must start. I mean, he has been so good this year when Brock Purdy has been healthy. I can't think of a single reason not to start this guy. It doesn't compute. There's no reason to sit Juwan Jennings moving forward. He's their wide receiver 1. That's plain simple. It's not an opinion. It's a fact. Now, as far as Deebo Samuel goes, look, he was on our bust list last week. He ended up busting again. This is now 4 games in a row where he has busted for fantasy football. He went to Twitter and said, I'm not struggling. I'm just not getting the ball. So could this be the beginning of him getting more opportunities? I mean, you know, we saw it with A.J. Brown last year, right? He complained and then he got more opportunities. I don't know if that's how Shanahan really likes to roll. I mean, he'll put you in the doghouse real quick if you try him like that. So I don't know, but here's what I'll say. With my fantasy hopes on the line, I don't think I'm going to rely on him. We have 4 weeks of evidence. Now, when you're watching this, you have to know that Deebo Samuel can pop off at any moment. He could have 30 points this week. We all know that's possible. But do you trust him with your entire life on the line? You have to ask yourself that question. So I don't think I can, but you got to make that decision for yourself, all right? Second matchup we'll look at, this is the start of the 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time slate of games. Cowboys at Panthers. 42.5 point over under, the second lowest over under of the week. The Panthers are favored by 1.5 points. CeeDee Lamb, of course, a must start. He has really built a nice connection with Cooper Rush. You know, last game out, gets into the end zone, almost 100 yards, over 21 PPR points. He's been very consistent. If not, it's not been different at all with or without Dak. So we're certainly not going to sit CeeDee Lamb because of Dak Prescott or not. I mean, he's been just as good with or without Dak Prescott. And then on the opposite side of the ball, yeah, you saw that right. Adam Thielen is a must start. Yes, I know your money's on the line. I know your fantasy hopes are on the line. I can only tell you what I would do, and I would be starting Adam Thielen if I had him. It's a top 10 matchup. It's a game where the Panthers are likely going to be down, needing to throw the ball. And we're talking about an Adam Thielen who is averaging 10.5 targets per game in the last 2 weeks. An Adam Thielen who is averaging over 100 receiving yards per game in the last 2 weeks, averaging over 20 PPR points per game. How can you sit this guy? Everything is lining up for him to have a good week. Now, moving on to the next game, we've got Chiefs at Browns. DeAndre Hopkins, you know, the only player I'm considering starting on the Chiefs side of the ball. The issue for D-Hop is he really is kind of touchdown or bust at this point with this team. If you look at his games without a touchdown, he's averaging well under 10 points per game. Games with the touchdown, great. He's averaging over, I think, 17 or 18 points per game. So it's really tough to rely on him because you have to count on a touchdown. Now, it is a good matchup. The Browns are a top 10 matchup for your wide receivers. So in deeper formats, put him out there. The matchup says he should produce. But again, it's been touchdown or bust pretty much this entire season. But as far as consistency gets, it doesn't get more consistent right now than Jerry freaking Jeudy. Talk your talk, Jerry Jeudy. I mean, what did Steve Smith say last year? It sparked something in this man. The wide receiver 11 on the season. He is 4th in scrimmage yards since week 11 onwards. I mean, the man is balling out on a mission. And the Chiefs, their secondary is completely destroyed right now with injuries. They're ravaged right now. Jerry Jeudy is a must start for me. Absolutely a must start. He has not busted since week 7. Jameis Winston takes over around that time, and Jerry Jeudy's been a must start each and every week. He's been one of the best players in fantasy football. Now, outside of Jerry Jeudy, if Tillman plays, I think he's a spot start, but he's currently still in concussion protocol, so I'd be a little bit hesitant with Tillman. And as far as Elijah Moore goes, you're not playing this guy with your fantasy hopes on the line. Moving on to the Dolphins at the Texans. All right, this is tied for the second largest over-under of the week. 47.5 points is the over-under, so we should see a lot of fantasy points in this one. The Texans are favored by 2.5 points. But the Dolphins are surging right now, right? Tua's kind of doing his thing. Tyreek looks great again. Jalen Waddle's involved. That is all great to see. It's also great to see that the Texans are the 6th best matchup for your fantasy wide receiver. So a lot of the stars are starting to align here. Tyreek Hill, my wide receiver 13 on the week. I do think you can go ahead and start him with some confidence. We're talking about back-to-back games where he had over 9 targets. And this last game, he had 14 targets, 115 yards, and a touchdown. He looked like the old Tyreek Hill. It was great to see. Competitive game, a great matchup. I like Tyreek Hill this week. Look, Jalen Waddle is a spot start. You can put him out there, but you have to know that in any moment he can disappear, all right? He can give you these 20-point games, or he can give you a 3-point game. There is no in between. So he's certainly a lot of fun upside you can infuse your lineup with, but, not the most reliable name. On the opposite side of the ball, Nico Collins is the only name we are trusting. Tank Dell, it's been about as disappointing as it could possibly be for Tank Dell in year 2. I don't think you can trust him. There's no evidence that you can trust him at this point. Nico Collins is the alpha. He's the only dude that you can trust in that offense. Moving on to the Jets at the Jags. Garrett Wilson, Davante Adams, 2 names that I do believe you can put into your lineups. The targets are never a problem. That's the thing. The target share is never the problem for Davante Adams and Garrett Wilson. They're both getting theirs. You can count on 8 to 10 targets for both of these names. The problem is Aaron Rodgers going to play competent enough to produce these wide receivers in fantasy football? Now, here's the good news. It's a great matchup. The Jags are the 4th best matchup for your wide receiver. The other good news is Breece Hall isn't the healthiest, so they might look to kind of throw the ball a little bit more. I know this week, last time out versus the Miami Dolphins, Aaron Rodgers threw for over 300 yards for the first time this entire season, and that was the first game without Breece Hall. So there is enough kind of arrows here connecting where, yes, Garrett Wilson and Davante Adams, you can rely on them this week. On the opposite side of the ball, I think Brian Thomas is the only name that you can think about. It's not a good matchup, the 3rd worst matchup for your wide receiver. And, you are relying on Mac Jones. It's not the first read target share is there, which is great to see, but it's not a quarterback that you can really rely on at this point. Moving on to Commanders at Saints. Here's the good thing about this matchup. This will be a fun narrative. So Marshawn Lattimore is probably going to make his debut. I'd be surprised if he didn't, right? Hasn't played for the Commanders yet, facing his old team in the Saints. I think he's probably going to want to show them a little something, you know what I'm saying? So this should be a very fun, narrative to kind of follow throughout the game. Terry McLaurin, we are going to start him with a ton of confidence. Saints are a top 13 matchup for your fantasy wide receiver, coming off a game where he had 2 touchdowns versus the Tennessee Titans, and he's the wide receiver 4 in the year. That's crazy. I actually just realized the wide receiver 4 in the year. That's actually nutty. On the opposite side of the ball, at the time of recording this, I have no idea if Chris Olave is going to play or not. Nothing's been talked about, okay? I don't have that information yet. By the time you're watching this, maybe you know. Now, if Chris Olave clears concussion protocol, he would be a spot start for me. But if Marshawn Lattimore is out there, I'd be very hesitant. Backup quarterback, potentially Marshawn Lattimore, a defense that is actually the 6th, 7th worst matchup without Marshawn Lattimore. This defense is pretty good right now through the air. I'd be very hesitant to start a Saints wide receiver with your hopes on the line. According to Catherine Terrell, Darren Rizzi, their interim head coach, talked about how they're kind of deciding between Spencer Rattler and Jake Hayner because Derek Carr, there's a good chance that he misses this game. They're not going to put Derek Carr on IR, but we're going to have to kind of monitor that throughout the week. So it's a mess. I'm not sure you really want to rely on this. Okay, Ravens at Giants, 43.5 point over under. 14.5 point spread, the largest spread I've seen this entire year, aka the Ravens. I don't know why I'm doing that accent. They should dominate. All right, they should bend over the Giants and give them a nice little spanking. All right, which you can't do nowadays. Why are we talking about this anyway? Zay Flowers is a must start for me. I know it's been a little bit up and down for him, but he's been really, really consistent. Since week 11, he hasn't had a single game under 10 PPR points. So at least he's not busting your week. And we know he has this ridiculous ceiling, with how good he is as a player. He can take any catch to the house. On the opposite side of the ball, I am going to label Malik Nabers a must start. It's the 7th best matchup for your wide receiver. And, while Malik Nabers is dealing with these injuries, last week he was dealing with an injury and they said he might be in a limited role. Well, this is what they considered a limited role. He played 94% of the snaps and he had 10 targets. All right, this team's going to be down the entire game. He's going to get plenty of garbage time opportunity. That's where he kind of shines, in that garbage time. So yeah, of course you can go out there and start Malik Nabers. Of course you can do that. Moving on, Bengals at Titans, tied for the second largest over-under of the week. So we should see a lot of fantasy points in this game. I am predicting a bounce back for T. Higgins. Jamar Chase, he's that superstar, all right? He's that creme de la creme, all right? One of the best players in fantasy football, but I do believe T. Higgins is going to bounce back. He's been so consistent this year when he's been healthy. I'm being pretty much every game since week 4 onwards. When he's been healthy, he's been extremely consistent for fantasy football purposes. It's just this one game. This happens in fantasy football, but there's no L'Jarius Sneed. I do believe this team is going to bounce back in a big way, including T. Higgins. Now, on the opposite side of the ball, I do believe you can start Calvin Ridley, my wide receiver 27 in my rankings this week. The Bengals are the 3rd best matchup for your wide receiver. So this is definitely a matchup that you can go out and exploit. Remember, last week we just saw CeeDee Lamb with the backup quarterback go off against his team. Why can't Calvin Ridley do that? I think it's possible. And the Linsanity streak of Nick Westbrook, Akini, Eenie Weenie, Yellow Polka Dot Bikini, the Linsanity streak is over. All right. He had 8 games, with the touchdown, and 8 touchdowns in 8 games, rather. But it's over. All right. We talked about this being a possibility. That floor was always there. I don't think you can trust him. All right, this brings us to the start of the 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time slate of games. 45.5 point over under here with the Patriots at Cardinals. Cardinals are favored by about a full touchdown. You got 2 defenses that are kind of middle of the pack against wide receivers, so they are beatable defenses. The problem with the Patriots is there's just been no consistency this entire season. Sure, Pop Douglas has been a fine floor, but Pop Douglas is not really what I'm looking for in the playoffs, so I'm not willing to start any Patriots wide receiver. It's weird, honestly, because Drake Mays looked pretty good, but no wide receiver has really stepped up for him. It's really been the tight ends. On the opposite side of the ball, I do think you can start Marvin Harrison. Now, wide receiver 30 is my last must start wide receiver. So he's really on that edge because he is so boom bust. But the matchup is pretty decent. Most of the time he has a bad game, he bounces back with a good game. At least the target share is there. So in deeper formats, I think you can put him out there as like an upside type of play. Moving on to the Colts at the Broncos, 43.5 point over under is a real messy situation in Indianapolis right now. Assuming Josh Downs plays, he and Michael Pittman are spot starts. I don't really trust them that much against the Broncos. And it's not really because of the matchup, because the Broncos have really fallen apart. This matchup's been much easier in the second half of the season, but it's more about Anthony Richardson. He can't really support one wide receiver for the most part. I don't know if we can trust 2. But if Josh Downs is ruled out, I think Michael Pittman becomes a legit startable name, but I would lower my expectations. Now, on the opposite side of the ball, there's just no scenario where you sit Courtland Sutton. That scenario does not exist in this realm that I'm living in right now. He's been one of the most consistent wide receivers since week 8 onwards, averaging well over 17 points per game. The guy's an absolute dog. He and Bo Nix continue to ascend together. The 11th matchup we'll look at is the Bills at the Lions. 53.5 point over under. The largest over under of the week. The largest over under I've seen this entire season. The Lions are actually favored by 2.5 points, so it's a very close spread as well. We should see a ton of fantasy points in this game. I'm starting Khalil Shakir with confidence. Amari Cooper becomes a spot start after getting some life last week with 14 targets against the Rams. Now, you have to hope for a similar game script, but versus the Lions, you could see a game script like that again for Amari Cooper. And then on the opposite side of the ball, Amon-Ra hasn't been, consistent, but remember week 11, he had a 38-point game. That's what you are relying on in the fantasy playoffs. Time to shut up and put up for Amon-Ra St. Brown. And this is a matchup where they're going to need him against the Bills. It should be a very competitive game all the way throughout. Jameson Williams has a very safe floor in the last, 4 or 5 weeks. He's given you at least 8 to 12 points. And we know the upside that he has if he ever scores a touchdown. He's got that 20, 30-point ceiling. So, he's another fun upside infusion name that you could add into your lineup. Moving on to the Bucs at the Chargers, 45.5-point over under. If Ladd McConkey plays, he'll be one of my favorite plays of the entire week. The Bucs are the best matchup in fantasy football, point blank period. They are the best matchup. Ladd McConkey should absolutely feast. It was so obvious that they missed Ladd McConkey in their last game. Let's just hope that he goes out there and plays. If he doesn't, I don't know that you start Quentin Johnston. Quentin Johnston's been the definition of boom bust. In games with touchdowns, he's averaging about 16 points. In games without touchdown, he's averaging about 3.5 points per game. But the good news for these pass catchers is that Will Disley is likely going to miss a couple weeks, which means that more of the target share kind of opens up. So even Josh Palmer, who's not on this graphic, if Ladd McConkey misses, I think Josh Palmer is a legit option as a startable name this week. Moving on, as far as Mike Evans goes, you're going to start Mike Evans every single week. All right, every single week you'll start Mike Evans. Moving on to the Steelers at the Eagles, 44.5-point over under. The Eagles are favored by 4.5 points. Unfortunately, George Pickens, who has had an incredible season this year, he is not going to play this week. At least all indications right now are pointing towards him not playing. He's dealing with a grade 2 hamstring strain. And I don't want to start any other name. This is the worst matchup in fantasy football for your wide receiver. I just don't trust any of these names outside of George Pickens. Even if George Pickens was playing, we might limit our expectations on him. Then you have A.J. Brown, who is my wide receiver 10 on the week. The last time A.J. Brown was upset and was demanding targets, he went on a generational run as a wide receiver for fantasy football. So I think we could see a little, squeaky wheel gets the grease type of situation for A.J. Brown this week. We're starting him with confidence for sure. Devonta Smith, on the other hand, a spot start. If he gets a touchdown, you're happy. If he doesn't, this is going to sound so rude, but for fantasy, Devonta Smith is pretty much Quentin Johnston this year. If he gets a touchdown, great. If he doesn't, it sucks. Not a high target share. Not a team that throws the ball a bunch. It's sad. Don't shoot the messenger. Devonta Smith is clearly the better player, not even close. But for fantasy, it's not all that different this year, if we're being honest. Moving on to Sunday Night Football, we've got Packers at Seahawks, 46.5-point over under. Jayden Reed is going to be a spot start. Now, he did drop a goose egg last week and a great opportunity. But here's the deal. Packers head coach Matt LaFleur talked about this week. He said, where we can be better, and I talked to Jayden about this, is just making sure we have some of those plays for him in the game plan where he's tagged in to go in there and play wide out, because he certainly, and he goes on to talk about how important he is to this team, how good he is as a player. Now, Romeo Doubs is still in concussion protocol. We'll see if he clears that this week. But regardless, if you're going to start any of these names, Jayden Reed is the only one that I would personally put out there. And it's a top 10 matchup for your wide receiver. At least you can hang your hat on that. And then on the opposite side of the ball, I do believe the transition has happened. I do believe that Jackson Smith and Jigba is the wide receiver 1 here in Seattle. It's been great to see. He's the wide receiver 5 on the season. You might not have heard that yet. It's crazy. Yes, it's true. In PPR formats, the wide receiver 5. The guy is balling out. Y'all know I love my Jackson Smith and Jigba. My jersey's over there. Freaking love this kid. I'm glad we're finally seeing this happen for him. DK Metcalf's been dealing with those injuries, but if he's going to go out there, we know DK has this 30-point floor that very few players actually have. Now, just one more thing on Jayden Reed, by the way. I know a lot of people are going to be afraid to start him, but I just want to give you some context. People play fantasy from one week to the next. They're so reactionary, and I get why. But if you look at from today and the entire last year, 365 days ago, one calendar year, in that time span, Jayden Reed is a top 7 wide receiver in fantasy football. From 1 year to the next, total fantasy points scored, he's a top 7 wide receiver. So, cut the man some slack, all right? All right, finishing off with a Monday Night Football doubleheader. Bears at Vikings to start. Divisional matchup here, 43.5-point over under. The Vikings are big-time favorites. DJ Moore is a must-start for me. It's a great matchup for these Bears wide receivers this week. Second best matchup in fantasy football against the Minnesota Vikings. Remember, we saw Darnell Mooney do his thing last week, which was great to see. You can throw against this team, against Minnesota. You can't run against them. You can definitely throw on them. I think DJ Moore is a fantastic play. Keenan Allen, Roma Dunze are more spot starts because you never know which one of them is kind of going to shine. It was good to see Roma Dunze get his. I do think that Keenan is a safer floor if you have to choose between the two. But clearly, Odunze has a pretty special ceiling as well. And then on the opposite side of the ball, Justin Jefferson's the only one I'm going to tell you to start with confidence. Now, friendly reminder, on this video last week, we told you to start Jordan Addison with confidence. We labeled him a must start, and that was because of the matchup against the Falcons. Now I'm going to tell you, proceed with caution this week. Don't chase that 40-point game. If you have clear, better options, go that route. This is not a good matchup against the Bears, all right? The Bears are one of the worst matchups in fantasy football for your wide receiver, but you can still play him if he's your best option. I'm just telling you, lower your expectations this week. And of course, we're not going to sit Justin Jefferson. We have a saying here, keep it simple, stupid, start your superstars. KISS. In the last game of the week, Falcons at Raiders, a Monday Night Football doubleheader. The over-under is 43.5 points. The Falcons are favored by 4.5 points. Drake London and Darnell Mooney, both must starts for me. It's technically not a good matchup, but I just trust these guys so much. I mean, who got you into the playoffs? These guys did. Drake London is a wide receiver 8. Darnell Mooney is a wide receiver 16. Who got you there? These are the guys who got you there. I think you can trust them and put them into your lineup. And then on the opposite side of the ball, Jakobi Meyers, I am going to label a must start. Falcons are the 5th best matchup for your wide receiver. You know, they've been giving up points. They've been bleeding points to the wide receiver position. So we're definitely going to start Jakobi Meyers with confidence. I don't even care who's at quarterback. Genuinely, I think he's going to give you a 10-point floor no matter who's at quarterback. Aiden O'Connell was diagnosed with a bone bruise. He's not ruled out for Monday, but there's a chance he doesn't play. So let's continue to monitor that throughout the week. All right, I appreciate y'all for watching the video. Do me a favor, hit that like button, show some love, subscribe if you like the content. Last thing I'll say is if you have a question that you need to ask me, a start sit question this week, check out the pinned comment. You can ask me a question at any time on the Flock Fantasy website. And when you're there, you can sign up for a free account with the promo code LAND, L-A-N-D. And, that will be available to you if you want a free account. And the running back video, is already up on the channel. So go check that out if you want. Outside of that, have a blessed day, and we'll see you soon. Good luck this week. Go get a win. Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, L-A-N-D, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.